What is this? Mini Long? Mini Loong? You can't be mini and long at the same time. It makes no... This is like an oxymoron, man. What in the world? Ooh, this looks pretty. This looks really pretty. What do we got inside of here? What do we got? Subscribe, please? No? Okay. Well, what about now?
Hello there.
Just look at the babies. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh, Fifth World Gamer, and so today we're going to be taking a look at the Mini Loong, okay, and so this right here, this little note that I got under the faceplate in here, and as you can see, the only thing that comes in the device is this little piece of paper and your charging cord there, your Type A to Type C charging cord. But anyway, for anyone who doesn't know, this faceplate actually comes off of the device, and so the little note's not going to stay there, for anyone who thought that my little spiel there was not cute in the beginning, but you know, I like to try to have a sense of humor, man. I don't like to be a boring individual. Okay, so first things first, we'll go ahead and take a trip to Spectown on this thing. This device is rocking the RK3566 chipset. Now, this is a chipset that was in the Anbernic RG353P, 353M, 353V, and VS. This chipset is more powerful than the H700 that has been in more recent Anbernic releases, but this device is not an Anbernic device. However, since Anbernic is the ones who used most of the 3566 chipsets, you know, I take that back. Powkitty also had several devices that came out with the RK3566 chipset, but it is a more powerful chip than the H700 as shown on the screen here with me popping these specs. So let's take a trip around this device, shall we? The D-pad on this device can actually be taken off and you can pop a different one on. And so this one only came with this particular D-pad though, and I've had no problems with it. It's a very nice, accurate D-pad. This thing, the size of it with its ergonomic grips that it has here on the back of it, 110% reminds me of the Anbernic RG406H, which is a much more powerful device, Android powered, rocking a T820. But this joystick is more akin to the newer Retroid devices, so this cap can be pulled off as well, okay, on this particular device. And I'm gonna try not to say particular so much. I've caught myself. I've went back, I've watched my videos, and this is called Fifth Wheel Gamer, not Mr. Particular. So I'm a very self-aware individual, at least I'm trying to be. So over here we have our start and select buttons, and we have these really nice see-through crystal buttons here. And up top here we have some very quiet shoulders and triggers, okay? There's no clicking sound coming from them, okay? We have our Type C charging port here. We have an HDMI out port here. We have our volume up and down, our power button right here. And then on the bottom, we have our two micro SD card slots, okay? Yes, they did just come out with a new custom firmware for this handheld. Russ from Retro Game Core just recently covered it. I believe it was called Leaf. But anyways, this device did not come with any Nintendo games loaded on it, so let's go ahead and boot the device real quick here. Okay, so upon booting this device, it actually took about roughly 15 to 20 seconds, a little under 20 seconds to boot the device. So as we continue the rundown on this device, we have one single mono speaker over here, right here on this side, but it gets very plenty loud, okay? And we have a menu button right here, and one thing I forgot, we got a very teeny tiny little reset button up here up top. Okay, but as far as controls goes, the hand feel of these controls is wonderful, okay? And I'm not saying that just to say it, okay? Sometimes it just seems like some of these guys get on here and they just glaze over devices, okay? I'm not trying to do that, okay? I legitimately am telling you that this device is quiet and comfortable, and everything is placed in a good position for what it can actually play. And listen to these face buttons so that I can give you an idea of how loud they actually are. Okay, so the loudest thing on here really is the start and select button. and the menu button, mainly the start and select buttons. So when you use your volume up and down, that's not all that loud, your power button. So this is an extremely quiet device. Now, as stated, this device did not come with any Nintendo games loaded on it. However, I was able to pull the SD card out of this device, pop it into my laptop. I had to repair the micro SD card, and then I was able to add my own ROMs to it. So I was able to add Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, and N64, which obviously it's not going to play every N64 game. Anyone who's familiar with the 3566 chipset understands these capabilities, but to anyone who's new to this chipset, okay, it is not going to play every N64 game out there. So don't get your hopes up too much on the higher end stuff for this device, because it also can play some PSP. Okay, NES, Game Boy, all the way up to PlayStation, that's all going to play absolutely just fine. But once you get into N64 and PSP, that's where you hit your slowdowns on this device. Now, jumping into some size comparisons with some other devices, we have here the Anbernic RG35XXH, which has a 3.5 screen at 640 by 480 resolution. Okay, however, the device that we are currently using, the Mini Loong, has a 4-inch display that's 4x3 at 960 by 720p on its display. Next up for comparison, we have the Anbernic RG Cube XX. And so this device has a 4-inch display that's 1:1 at 720 by 720. So same resolution, same size, but just a completely different aspect ratio that's more like a box. The chipset in it is the H700, same chipset that's in the 35XXH. So power-wise, this one also is just slightly under the Mini Loong right here. Okay, so while the Mini Loong has a 4-inch display that's at 960 by 720p, okay, at 4x3, the INEO Pocket Air Mini is a 4.2-inch display, so slightly larger at 1280 by 960, so a slightly higher resolution on the INEO Pocket Air Mini, and its chipset is a G90T, so it is a much stronger device than the Mini Loong. Also, it's Android powered. And the screen brightness is just slightly higher at 500 nits on the INEO Pocket Air Mini versus the 450 nits of brightness that's on the Mini Loong. The RG Cube XX that I just showed, it was also 500 nits. And the RG35XXH was between 3 and 350 nits, so not quite as bright as any of them. Okay, so next up we're taking an immense jump up in power with the INEO Pocket S Mini with its G3X Gen 2 Snapdragon chip, which is right on par with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. So this is a very powerful Android device. This is a Linux device that, is rocking its RK3566 chipset. Okay, this device is 500 nits of brightness, this one's at 450, and really the only thing comparable about the two of them is the shape and the size, but this one weighs a lot more. But I just figured I'd throw it in there for comparison as we await the Retroid Pocket Nova to arrive. Okay, so jumping into the custom menu for this device, okay, and I forgot to mention, I can't remember if I said it, but this device does have a headphone jack. But jumping into the menu here, you can control everything with your D-pad, and you have a favorite section. You can divide your games up into genres that it has here. Okay, you can save favorites to it if you want to, and then you have an app section right here where you can play 2048, or you can add videos to this device, turn it into your personal music player, and you have the full access to the RetroArch menu. Okay, so hit back to get out of that. Okay, if you want to change anything about the device itself, you hit your little menu button down here, and you can go into your game settings. You can choose the style of menu, whether you want the simplified menu for when you're getting in and out of your game, or whether you want the full access RetroArch menu for when you're getting in and out of your game. Okay, now we have our display here, so you just go into your brightness and you can sit there, turn it all the way down, so it gets not too terribly dim. Honestly, I've seen devices that get much dimmer than this. Okay, so not the best, not the worst. I don't really care either way. This here, it's got its Wi-Fi, and as you can see here, you also have Bluetooth, and we have our date and time set up on here. We can do our key testing here. We can do our key mapping. We can calibrate our joystick, which the joystick is just fine on this device for the most part. We have our sound menu here, lights, so we can customize the light on this device to turn it off if we want to give it that nice clean look, or we can turn it on. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to go ahead and turn the light off. Okay, here's where we can change our language. If you are American, I don't recommend it. Here we are. We can change the color of the text and the size of the text, all that kind of stuff, display the battery percentage. You can reset all the settings right here, and then right here is where you're going to find out what firmware you're running. So if you installed Leaf on this, then this would be where you would come to check out your firmware version if you ever needed it for any reason. And so that about does it for the menu settings on this device. And so going down here, let's go ahead and jump into a game and let's do a sound test. All right, so we're going to do our sound test using the Sega Genesis game Gyarados. So I love the music on this game, that's why I chose it. And that's as loud as that mono speaker is going to get. Okay, so after that wonderful sound test, we jump into some Game Boy gameplay with Super Plumber's Crack 2, the 6 pennies laying on the ground. And so we have here a beautiful screen, and if you notice, one cool thing about this is that Mini Loong actually has their own custom bezels, okay? So things like that, I really enjoy things like that. I get tired of, seeing the same old every now and then, and so it's nice to see that one of these handheld companies out here is kind of trying to do their own thing. And, I'm here for it, man. I support anyone who's trying to build their brand. And to me, Mini Loong put out a good enough handheld that they deserve to be able to put their own custom bezels onto a Game Boy game. Okay, so here we are with some Game Boy Color, and while they did a good job on the Game Boy, the original Game Boy, the bezels that they picked for Game Boy Color, which by the way change with every Game Boy Color game, they have one with the art style for each different game that goes around it, but to me it's just a bit much. But you can go into the RetroArch settings and you can change this to where it'll just display the game in its native aspect ratio. But if you load up Game Boy Color games, I'm just letting you know that this is how they're going to come out with the little cropped out screen in the center there. So if you can deal with that and that's how you want to play it, then cool. But to me, this was just a bit much because it just shrinks down the real estate a little too small for my old peepers. Now, jumping into some 4x3 content with some good old-fashioned NES, which on this it's going to be labeled as Family Computer. Boy, I really dragged that out, didn't I? Family Computer. No, it's Family Computer, which is just, their Japanese way of saying NES. Same thing with Super Nintendo. It's going to be Super Family Computer or whatever. But, yeah, this Battletoads game, let's just get into some gameplay on it real quick so I can give you guys a clue of just how amazing this device is for 4x3 content. Alright, so here I am playing as Rash or Zits or Pimple, whichever one of the adolescent diseases it is that they gave me here. But, I love Battletoads, by the way. This is another one of those games that was notoriously difficult that I managed to beat as a child. So I have to take my wins where I can get them, you guys. I have to brag every now and then. There's nothing like being able to do what other people could not do. So let's spice it up a little bit today, something a little different. We have here some Gamegear with Sonic Blast, okay? So I'm playing as Knuckles, and I did not know it until recently because of how little time that I'd spent with the Gamegear, okay? But the Gamegear was natively a 4x3 system. I thought that it was going to be one of those things where it was similar to the Game Boy, 1-to-1 or whatever. And so, it was kind of like, shut my stupid mouth. No, it's a full-blown 4x3 system, and so I figured I'd throw it in here. And these colors really look nice on this display. Maybe I'm just seeing it with blinders, but with this D-pad it actually reminds me a lot of the Sega Gamegear, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like Sega consoles are going to be extremely welcome on this device, because of the fact that this D-pad, the shape of it is so similar to what you would have gotten on the Sega Genesis or on the Gamegear. So next we jump into some Sega Genesis with Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi. And I never got to play this one growing up. I did get to play some Shinobi, but I did not get to play this one growing up. So once again, 4x3 content, you're really going to enjoy it on this handheld. This is a 4x3 handheld, a very good resolution for what we're dealing with. Ambernick, when they were coming out with their early on 4x3 systems that had this chipset in it, okay, the only problem was the display was 3.5 inches on all of their handhelds, which is fine for some people, but for guys like me, that extra half inch actually makes a difference whenever you're trying to play these games. And so I really appreciate the added screen size with the added chip power, because like I said, Ambernick dropped down in power when they started releasing devices with the H700 chipset, and this 3566 chipset is the better route to go. Alright, so next we jump into some Super NES gameplay with some Demon's Crest. Oh yeah, the devil's in that game, boy. You better get away from that devil. I never got to play Demon's Crest. Once again, this is the fun in having this channel, okay? Is I get to launch these games out of random for you guys, and I get to play things that, when I was growing up, I'd look at the back of the box and the cover art, and I'd be like, Mommy, look it, I want to play this game. And they'd look at it and they'd say, no, that's got devils in it, boy, you ain't gonna play that game. And so, while, I'm not, all about devils and stuff, I'm not that kind of person, okay? But, the games that had this sort of stuff in it, I kind of saw them as harmless. I see video games in general as harmless until you start getting into like the newer generation where people are doing things in games that they shouldn't be. All right, so next up I figure we'll try out some fireballs and some shoryukens with Street Fighter 02, also known as Street Fighter Alpha 2. And so if you're any kind of a Street Fighter fan, which I don't know a lot of people that are not, okay, the Alpha series was epic because I really love the animation. Okay, so before I forget what I'm doing here, okay, shooting your fireballs and pulling off your hurricane kicks on this device, absolutely pretty much flawless. For the most part. I mean, you do got to kind of lean into it a little bit when you're doing those half-quarter motions to get your dragon punches off. But, I mean, that's how you would have had to do it on an original Sega Genesis controller, too. So, for me, that's comfortable because that's what I grew up on. If you prefer the traditional Super NES style D-pad, then this might not be for you on the fighting games. Okay, so here we are jumping up into 32-bit consoles, even though I'm pretty sure that Street Fighter Alpha was also 32-bit. Yeah. So I just forgot to announce that. Anyways, with Game Boy Advance, once again, we have a custom bezel here for Mini Loong at the bottom of it. So these guys, I'm here for it, okay? If these guys want to make their own custom bezels, as long as it fits into the proper aspect ratio, I'm totally cool with it. And I think that this looks great. That's just me personally. But let's go ahead and test out some platforming real quick. Let's go ahead and test out the run and jump to see, how smooth it is to be able to run and jump at the same time, and changing course in the middle of, your running and different things like that. See if there's any lag noticeable. And so far, let's see, I think that we're pretty good on it. You do have to be intentional when changing directions, it seems like. So that could be a problem for some people. But just make sure that, when you go from the one side of the D-pad to the other, that you are actually holding the buttons. And you do need to press down firmly. If you're lightly pressing down, you could miss an input on some of these runs and jumps and things like that. And but right now I'm not having any problems with it at all. That's not what the point I'm trying to get across. I'm just saying that make sure that when you press down on the buttons that you are pressing firmly, because otherwise you might end up walking when you should be running, or you might end up still going right when you should be going left. Okay, so here we are jumping into some Vigilante 8 Second Offense on the PS1. And, I love the Vigilante 8 series, except when I grew up playing it on the N64. However, extremely fun. Kind of reminds me of Twisted Metal, except, the problem with Twisted Metal is, number one, I didn't grow up on it. Number two, you have to hold up on the steering, on the joystick or on the D-pad to make your vehicle accelerate in Twisted Metal, versus a game like this where you actually just hold the accelerator button and go, which is much more what I prefer. But you know, it's a weapon-based combat racing game, and it won't even play on the N64 emulator. As a matter of fact, even on higher end systems, you have to change the renderer in order to get this game to display properly. So if you want to play it in all of its glory, just launch the PlayStation 1 version and enjoy. But it looks wonderful on this little 4x3 display at 720p. Okay, so jumping to some N64 gameplay here, we have Dirty Italians Like to Go Go-Karting, and on here it's going to play some N64 games just fine. For example, this game, Mario Kart 64, is going to run absolutely okay for the most part, and using the joystick to steer your character feels very comfortable. However, the only problem is that this joystick automatically leans in whenever you go to do your power slide, and it does not go all the way to the left or to the right, which really messes up your ability to race well. And so you're not going to want to play N64 racing on this particular handheld, because it's just going to kind of annoy you with that. As a matter of fact, you can't even get Mario to run all the way, which was something that Russ was complaining about with this device. Maybe they fixed that with Leaf OS, and so I'm going to have to try it once I download that firmware for this device, because I am going to give it a try. But for right now, I would not recommend any games that require you to run, or any games that require you to make sharp turns like racing games on the N64, if you manage to get one of them running. Okay, so jumping into PSP on this device, I wanted to see if I could change some of the settings, like for example to see if the game was starting out at 2x resolution or if it was starting out at 1x resolution, and to see what aspect this is, because while I don't think that it's 16:9, it's also not 4:3. It almost looks like it's running in a 3:2. And so when I hit the menu button down here, lo and behold, it pulls everything up in Chinese. Now, one thing that you can do to change this is that you should be able to look at the screen of this device with your smartphone and pull up Google Lens and hit translate to English. And then you should be able to change these settings in order to be able to swap the language to English. Okay everyone, so using my Google Lens and hitting translate, I was able to look at the menus one by one in PPSSP and get everything swapped over to English. So now I can have a look at what the actual game settings are that they've started us out at with this handheld. And so it looks here like they're running OpenGL. And it says here that they're running full screen, but see, you can change the layout and effects right here. And so when you go into this setting right here, you can go to aspect ratio, you can hit A there, and then you can either thin it out to where it's closer to 16:9, or you can stretch it out where it's closer to 4:3. And so the choice is yours. I would prefer for this particular game to be in its proper aspect ratio. And so I'm dropping it down closer to 4:3. And so now you can see that it looks proper. And on this game, it is only running at, let's see what resolution they actually have us running at here. Okay, so the resolution was at 1x. However, I changed it from OpenGL to Vulkan just to see if that makes any difference whatsoever in the actual gameplay. And so we're about to find out. So here I am, I've turned the volume up just a little bit, and it looks like we're pretty much running at 30 frames a second. I do have the resolution displaying up at the top of the screen there. And so let's see what happens as soon as we jump onto a motorcycle. I'm going to have to turn the sound effects back down though, just so we don't get copyright strikes. So turning that down, hopping on the motorcycleta here. And once again, we have a problem here, Houston. Okay, the whole thing with this joystick not wanting to go all the way to the left or to the right is really counterproductive to your steering. So unfortunately, this is going to be a huge deal unless this is fixed in Leaf. Okay, so before I bash this device too hard, okay, Leaf OS does fix the joystick issue of not being able to turn all the way when you're in racing games and run whenever you're playing platformers like Mario 64 and things like that, okay? But the thing is if you know nothing about installing custom firmwares and things like that, then you may not want to get this handheld if you're someone who just wanted to add your ROMs to it and then play your games. However, this handheld does come with ROMs already on it, and the ROMs, the systems it comes with already on it, don't seem to have those issues because they're mostly D-pad centric, or they're arcade games that only require you to be actually moving in that direction and they don't have a full analog motion. And so that is a pretty big deal. But for the tinkerer who likes to install custom firmwares and things like that, you're going to enjoy this handheld, because you're going to install that custom firmware. You're going to have a larger 4-inch display to play on, rather than the 3.5-inch display that's on all the other 3566 chipset devices that are out there for the most part. If you wanted a larger 3566 chipset, but you wanted it in a 16:9 display, which I don't know why you would for most retro systems, but you could always go with something like the Powkitty RGB10 Max 3 for that sort of thing, and that one has a 3566 chipset in it. But once again, who wants to have to do all that? For this device to be $75 to $100, I do think that it's kind of a hard ask with that joystick issue, whenever there's so many people out there that are actually already going to know how to add their own ROMs, and they're going to see this issue. But if you take the time to go and add LeafOS to this, and then go into Joe's Cali Bridge and calibrate the joystick on it, then you're going to have a fantastic 3566 handheld that is very comfortable in the hands, very much customizable, and you'll enjoy it. So anyway, that's my take on the whole thing. I'm Josh the Fifth Wheel Gamer, and once again, I am out of here. Like and subscribe for more great content. Share and comment down below.